Have you ever stopped to think about the story behind the little pill in your hand while taking your medication?
How did it come to be? What hurdles did it overcome to finally reach you?
Hi everyone, I'm Sue.
I'm Iris.
We are APTX Modern Pharma. We are dedicated to creating a groundbreaking pill that reverses time, paving the way for human immortality.
While this pill remains a fiction concept, we will use this story as a thread to unravel the mysteries of how medicines come into existence.
Taking you through the journey from an idea to production,
From research and development to clinical trials.
and finally to the hands of everyone.
In each episode of our show, we will invite a special guest to share their unique stories and experiences in the world of drug development.
Come to join us.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Aprotoxin 4869 Modern Farm channel. Today we are thrilled to have an old friend Kasha joining us on the channel. Kasha is a true expert in medical device process development, and she's here to share her incredible journey, insights, and most importantly, her passion for this amazing field.
That's right. We are kicking off the holiday season with our guest, Kasia. She is an expert in medical device process development, and her work spans everything from nanofabrication to wearable biosensors. Kasia, we are so excited to have you here today.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me on this podcast. I am very excited for this opportunity.
Could you give us a brief introduction of yourself?
Yeah, my name is Kasia. As I've been introduced, I am working as a part of process development engineer at a startup company where we are focusing on the development of medical devices that could help the management of disease, such as like diabetes or some type of a long chronic disease that people have to maintain a certain level of health.
So Kasha, you have had quite impressive career so far. You have done some incredible work in nanofabrications, electrochemical biosensors, diagnostic tools, and it's really impressive how you linked your previous experience together and those work kind of connected back to your current work. Now that you have shifted gears from a research-oriented settings to developing a practical market-ready products, so looking back at all your experience, which part of your journey do you think helped you shaped your skills the most and also got you here to where you are now?
So basically, because I have a research background, the moment you decide to leave academia, not many people appreciate postgraduate research experience. So my current role does not translate directly from the postdoc experience. However, the life skills did transfer. So whether that is talking with a lot of professors, meeting with a lot of people, or talking to a lot of people who do not share the same background as you, really trained me to have a better communication. So the industry where people from software development, they don't know anything about chemistry, but you will learn to communicate with them. And the biggest learning curve that I had when I went to the industry is that you have to be 100% quicker, and you have to make sure that you are quote unquote useful. Whatever that usefulness could come from anything. So for example, I did, biosensor development as a researcher. I did a lot of benchtop, and then I had to learn Python. And I always had opportunities for mentoring, but then I never had to work with people for their career development. So for example, I have direct reports that are trying to get promoted. Then it is my job to make sure that they are getting a visibility from company to make sure that they get promoted. So I would say number one skill set that you will learn is that you will be flexible and you will do whatever that is on your plate, and doesn't have to be your particular skill set.
Thanks for sharing your experience transitioning from academia to industry. It is often a big leap, and it's been fascinating to hear about your journey. I'm really curious though, what was your first industry job look like? Did it live up to your expectations, or were there some surprises along the way?
All right, so my first industry position was a very fortunate one. It is a much bigger company that is kind of on the front edge of the DNA sequencing platform. So in that particular company, I was able to participate as a scientist to do a hands-on research and development for their new cutting-edge platform. I think at that moment, the research phase we're supposed to go into production maybe in like 5 to 8 years after. So it was very, very long term. They had a very specific goals, and we had multi-global sites communicating at once. So it was very, very fun experience that I had there. The industry itself, I was very treated well. So not because sometimes industry can be really strict with how much you could get to do, how much you get to learn. But at Illumina, I had the pleasure of, if I had any questions what other team is doing, I could ask them. They were very friendly in terms of that. So I learned a lot in terms of communication, collaborating with cross-functional teams. And I honestly love the job there.
I think it's same for me. I got my first job at a GMP organization. I didn't know much about drug development at the beginning of my career, but the people here is friendly and they are willing to teach me anything as long as I ask. I learned a lot from them, and that's also why we want to start a podcast. We want to invite a talent like you, like my colleagues, to share their experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is definitely eye-opening how much of regulations, how much of testing, and how much of documentation that goes into every single step of the way in industry. And it's just more you know, more you don't know. So you just continuously learn.
Actually, I have one question about your experience after you know that you have been laid off. How
Mhm.
do you maintain the positive attitude to find the next job?
Yeah, it wasn't it very stressful. But the thing is, like, bigger company was very genuine, at least, where they told all the employees that there may be a layoff in the next quarter. So they announced a layoff months before that it is coming up. We don't know what's happening, and we're figuring it out right now. So starting on that point, I was able to connect with all the people and just go for, apply as many as I could. Don't take anything personal or like reflection of your skill sets when you get denied. Just apply. If you get rejection letter, just delete that email and then move on to the next one.
That's
Yeah.
actually interesting to know since I know a lot of people currently are looking for some new opportunities recently due to the massive layoff. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really hard job market. They're still laying people up, especially in California.
Yeah, it was definitely a challenging time now, but it is also a great chance to kind of pause and reset, kind of reflect and think about where you want to be, where you want to take your career.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so then what sparked your interest in diagnostic technology?
So for me, my journey actually started all the way in undergrad. I had a really close friend who got diagnosed with cancer during the last like senior year of, how do I say, undergrad, like last semester. And that's where I got really upset. I got really upset about like how we cannot do this, delay the diagnostics, and that's how I got really interested in, okay, what can I do to help people get early diagnostics or help for their conditions. And I kind of stayed true to that motivation all throughout my career. So like I went to grad school, and then that was kind of specialized in biosensor development because sensor I need to make a sensor to diagnose people early. And then I went to grad where I was like, oh, okay, so I know how to build one. How can I make it more sensitive or more applicable? So my last postdoc was like, how can we find DNA, variant directly from saliva instead of relying on all these like needles and high cost MRI? And then when I went to industry, it was also DNA sequencing, which was diagnostic tool. And right now I'm also in a medical device company, which is a direct correlation to what I studied in the grad school. So it's like I have jumped around in many different roles from an outside perspective, but I have stayed very true to my passion, which is I want to stay in the diagnostic tool industry, and I just want this cutting edge research to be available for patients as soon as possible.
It is so inspiring to hear how your personal story with your friends has driven your passion for diagnostics and early detection, and how you have stayed committed to that mission throughout your career. Now I'm really curious about how do you translate research concept into products that can be manufactured and ultimately used by patients? I can imagine there might be things like biosensor design, automation, and preparing documentation and such. But what are the key stages in that process? What does process development for a medical device actually look like? Can you give us a glimpse into what your daily work looks like?
So my day-to-day life, like you have mentioned, it depends on which phase you are. So there's definitely the first stage where you have to conceptualize what you're thinking and how that device is going to work. Tell you the truth, there are many, many smart people out there. Chemistry has been studied. The problem we're trying to face is not about, oh, how can I make this cool research? It is more like, how can I make this research more feasible to go into the market? So the concept design could just vary from chemistry, like chemicals that we use, all the way to the design, like the outer application. How are we going to have this particular design go in and be used to to patients out there? So once the concept is kind of narrowed down, you can choose, depending on the funding situation, you go into the next stage of where you can do the prototyping. So we used to have, like, for example, 3 different sets of ideas that we were invest in, and then we were down selecting into one that would be the most, how do I say, like more affordable for the patients. So that's where the prototyping went. Then the continuous prototyping was kind of bridging the manufacturing side from the research side. So right now we're in the development phase, and that's where I am. So research is like, oh, what if we do this? Oh, what if we do that? And then the development side has to be like, choose one, and then we can optimize. So it's a lot of back and forth with the research about like, okay, have a final design, and then from there we can make a process. So process could mean, like, research setting, it used to be just like, okay, I make one product and I test that. I make 3 products, I make that. Process talks about tens and thousands of products. So if you tell me that you have to hand touch one by one, that is not going to work. So then we talk a lot about different prototypes, different processes that we can go for to scale up. The first stage of the scale up does not have to be like we go from 0 to 1,000,000. It just has to be more machine based. You can still have humans there, but how can we minimize human interactions to make sure that it could be written in an SOP? So, for example, if you do everything, how am I supposed to read your mind, right? So then if we use a machine, can we train that person to use the machine to do the process? So that would be the first stage. And then once you're kind of like okay with the process and you have kind of optimized to a certain type of midway fabrication, that's when the process development kind of goes towards manufacturing. So before you can go into the manufacturing, you have to make sure like your design is set. Like y'all, you cannot change your process if you're going into manufacturing because all the machine will be tailored and like it will be customized for that particular process. So while it is okay to change like here and there a little bit, but if you're going to change anything dramatic, you will have to go through a rigorous process development again. And that's where a lot of ISO certifications come in. Those things really regulate how much of change you can do per process or even per design. So at the end of the day, when you get the process into manufacturing and then manufacturing is like we're ready to go and then you go into the regulatory, then they are like, okay, we are only producing this, we are using this process, nothing is changing, and this is what we're getting certified for, and therefore every year we're going to get audited to make sure that we stay on this particular process. So I kind of am sandwiched in between the two. That means I get to see a lot and learn a lot between the two.
So I know kind of biosensor are like analytical device that can convert biological response into like a measurable signal. Could you kind of elaborate on what a biosensor is and how it's playing a role in like diagnostics and especially for like measuring biomarkers like blood sugars?
Yeah, absolutely. So this kind of goes back for us because you and I were in the biosensor research lab together. So a biosensor, I have specifically worked with enzymatic biosensor. So enzymatic biosensor means that we are using enzymes to detect whatever the analyte we want in a particular system. So for example, one of the biomarker could be alcohol. You know, we have always like when you get caught by the police officer and they are in doubt of whether you're drinking or not and driving, you have to blow into this little device to detect alcohol, right? That is enzymatic biosensor because it uses an enzyme to detect how much of alcohol you have in your breath, and then it reads an output in a numeric form to see, oh, okay, so you're in this calibration curve right over here and you're above or below. So that is essence of what a biosensors do, especially enzymatic biosensors. It doesn't have to be always in vitro, meaning outside of the body. If you are interested in something like implantable devices, that is also doable. You just have to go through a lot of testing. But the bottom line is whatever the analyte you want to detect has a kind of affinity or it is a perfect match with the enzymes that you're putting onto the biosensor, and that particular sensor can be triggered multiple ways. It could be optical, where you look at how it's visibly changing. I think the flow, the pregnancy strip, they also uses a lot of not enzymatic but other bio components to detect the hormones, and you can see two lines versus one line. That could be like a visual. Something that I mostly work on is electronics. So I try to convert the interaction between my analyte and the enzyme I choose into some type of electrical signal that gets me the calibration curve. So there are multiple ways of doing it, but then the biosensor wants to go into a little more robust ways, because enzymes, if you think about it, enzymes can degrade at room temperature very easily. So maintaining the stability and or how do I say, activity on that biosensor is like the hot topic of research right now. So you can go into like protein engineering, you can go into more better immobilizations or other very creative ways where people look at non-enzymatic. But right now, the biosensors are kind of holding the market because enzymes are intrinsically so good at recognizing one analyte. And so it's really hard to compete with the natural way of selecting the analyte.
So since medical device is basically like a commercialized biosensor, what are the difference between those two? Are there like how many types of medical device are there, and are there special requirements or even stringent regulations you need to follow during the development?
So the medical devices have different regulations depending on the risks that it brings. So anything that is, let's say, outside of your body, they go through rigorous but less rigorous standards. So they would probably look for a clean room, maybe, if not a good manufacturing practices environment. That is a whole new beast of regulations you have to deal with. What I'm working on is what people call class 2 medical devices, where they have to go through more different types of bioevaluations depending on the risk we bring. So the moment that medical device touches anything of inside of your body, it has to go through what we call 10993, which is a biological evaluation of medical devices. And there's like part 1 of that regulation is 99 pages long. So it has a really long and vigorous one. It basically states, depending on how long that device is going to stay in your body, or how, where in your body it's going to be touching, it goes through cytotoxicity, subchronic, cytotoxicity, all those things. So there are 2 big parts to this. So one is making sure the medical device does work in an environment like a human body. That's what I call the 10993, without killing you. So basically that tells you that this medical device does not kill any humans when it goes through the body for whatever the exposure time we have. The other part is manufacturing. So that is a whole new different certification we have to follow. So there are another, I cannot remember the ISO number for it. There is an entire guideline on the risk assessment of the medical devices, which is a separate from a manufacturing for the medical devices, which is, I believe, 13485. So those actually have a very specific number as well that you need to follow. For example, I think once the product goes into all of the manufacturing line, it has to be in a very sterile process or place where there is 1 in 1 million chance to find a live bacteria. So I think it's like 10 to the negative 6th chance of finding a live bacteria after sterilization and after a full product manufacturing. On top of like the design control, the clean room setup, and all the SOP documentations that we have to write. So y'all, this goes back to what I was talking about. If you're going into development manufacturing, you better know exactly what process you're working with before we go anywhere.
So any points before clean room, you can make changes. Like after that, you're gonna need approval or change control if there are like any even slightly change in the coding or like modeling, 3D modeling.
Yeah. So that I believe also has a different process. So I'm currently in talk with my manager for regulatory affairs. So our regulation also has rules on what kind of changes we can make without submitting another form. So in large, if your product is so special, nobody has done whatsoever similar to what you're doing, that you have to go through, I believe, what the process PMA. It's a pre-market approval where you have to get approved by the FDA saying, okay, this is good to go. But if your product is not too different from what you or you might get exposed to other companies. So if there's a competitor who's doing, you don't have to get a full PMA approval. You can do 510K submission. That literally takes your competitor's submission and then compare it exactly to that, saying, hey, our products work very similar to this one. We are matching all of our specification as much as we can to this product. We don't have to go through that quote unquote more rigorous PMA submission. So that being said, it depends on what stage you're at. If you have already submitted like a 510K, then every change you make has to be very subtle. And there are a whole new set of regulations on what kind of design control that you're making or what kind of changes. If it's about like, oh, we're changing like one height, like, oh, we're using this like syringe and then the height of syringe is changing, you also have to report that in. And then when the regulatory affair receives it and then they see that you have changed way more than just one that you mentioned, they will reject that. So it is very, very regulated in terms of what kind of changes you can do from the point where you know your process and this is the manufacturing process that you're getting approved for. Oh, and yes, software also applies. So every software update that you have to do also gets screened through. I think a little less rigorous than the designs that you have to do for process development, but they also go through similar process of being not audited, but like checked before you can implement that change.
Before you guys to like submit all these documentations, do you need to do a clinical trial for the medical device? Since we all know that for a drug product, we may have three phase clinical trials.
Yes, absolutely. Part of 10993 is, I believe, actually, is it part of 10993? It might not be part of 10993, but it is definitely part of 510K that you have done some type of clinical trial to show that it also works. I think before you go into the human clinical trial, you also have to do the rabbit clinical trial. So there are definitely stages that you have to go through but it's also different regulations apply to different ones to particularly what I'm doing because it has to be implantable. It does go through a very rigorous testing stages. And something really crazy is like you make the product, right? We were trying to get ready for all these biocompatibility testing. You can't do that. Your own company cannot do biocompatibility testing. Your own company shouldn't do a clinical trial. And then it was the funniest moment ever because we have a doctor and we have a clinical room ready to test our products, but we can do it, but then you will have to put in so much more controls to prove that you as the company did not biasly get this data or something. So arranging for the clinical trial and biocompatibility is a beast. It's another whole, 6 months, 8 months process that we can go into.
So the clinical trial is like test all about the cytotoxicity, biocompatibility, and anything else?
For the 10993, here, let me pull up a 10993. It's actually really funny because depending on what you are dealing with, there's too much that you need to do. Okay, so if it's an implantable medical device and it is touching anything of your blood, okay, you're implanting it in your blood, there are 3 choices that you can make, okay? It could be limited where it is going into your body for like less than a day or about a day, 24 hours, or prolonged where you're doing it anywhere from day to 30 days, or long term, more than 30 days. So then if we look at, let's say, worst case scenario possible, you want a medical device that is touching blood and it's going to be more than 30 days, it's going to be implanted. Then you will have to do, let's see, cytotoxicity, sterilization, irritation, material-mediated pyrogen, acute systematic toxicity, subacute toxicity, subchronic toxicity, chronic toxicity, implantation effects, hemocompatibility, genotoxicity, carcinogenics. Those are the things that you must test out for before you can even go near the certification process. And hence the reason why a lot of medical device companies have to, it takes a lot of money to even get these products out. Because we have to do so many rigorous testing, right? But also, how can we pass all these rigorous testing if we don't have, for example, a clean room to manufacture or even fabricate any of these materials? Like if you make the medical devices on a bench top where people are talking next to you and breathing and skin flowing everywhere, we will never pass it. So that means we have to make a clean room with the design and control the processes. And if your process is not confirmed, then you have to go all the way back to the research and make sure that the process is defined. And y'all, it is very expensive. Clean rooms are very, very expensive. I think right now, the company I work for does not have a clean room built in as a part of the company space. So what we had to do was we first tried to build a clean room. And what we realized is you actually need a city approval and a fire marshal approval, which takes at least months to get those approvals. So they did not want that. So that because we're a startup company, we ain't got time to wait 6 months. So then we rented out, this was really cool. We rented out a trailer. Have you seen on RV cars, massive trailers that you can live for days? We rented one out, and that is a portable clean room. So it's they have all the equipments there, or all the settings there. It is clean room ready. We get it cleaned out and whatnot. Do you know how much that cost per week? It's $8,000
For what?
per week.
Waste disposal. How does that?
No, just to rent out that clean room.
Oh, just rental.
That one RV size clean room is $8,000 right now. That does not include any of the equipment or waste or anything, just that clean room.
Not even parking fee?
Thank goodness we have the parking pass for us. It is just extremely expensive. So medical device company, and hence the reason why I can kind of understand why startup companies have such a little success rate, especially if it's a medical device company. It's just so costly, and there's so many regulations and too many ideas are out there. So it has to be one cohesive, let's go, we got this, we do it.
Yeah, the bar is pretty high. So
yeah.
For your daily job for process development, do you guys just do the concept and the feasibility phase and kind of sourcing out the preclinical testing to a certified company, or?
Yeah, so again, because it's a startup company, that is what I do. I do both the prototyping, development, testing, and also finding an external vendor to see they can do the compatibility on top of making sure that the process can be written down, ready to go for manufacturing, also working with the manufacturing to further scale up the process.
So going back, the prototyping and the development testing you mentioned earlier, does that kind of work also need to be performed inside a clean room?
So the initial phase of prototyping, we don't have to. But if we are thinking about, for example, robots, in my case, to do things in clean room, then yes, we have to make sure that the process does work in a clean room setting. And this is a whole new beast. So right now for prototyping, we 3D print materials. That is not clean room safe. We have to buy clean room certified tapes. We have clean room certified labeling tapes, everything. So the moment you go to the prototyping, that means you have made a decision to see how compatible it is to the clean room. So usually you will have to get like, I don't know, I think they're looking into like injection molding and or like metal fixtures so that it does not continuously make the debris. Whole new different designs to do. But we have to see the feasibility of making the product automated inside of the clean room.
So, what are the basic requirements for setting up a clean room?
Yeah, so there's like a filtering of the air. There's also the vacuum. There's gonna be like an antechamber where you come in and then you sterilize yourself and then you go in. Setting up a clean room, who are certified to clean the clean room and get that certified to whatever the class that you have. I think there's like class 7, class 8, or something like that. And different classes have a different bacteria count that they will test. I will say so though, if you are in the early development phase of the process development and you want to bring your assembly line to the clean room, everything you bring has to be clean. And as a really fun story, we had a process ready to go. We were ready. And then we were like, okay, we have a clean room. Let's get the assembly line in the clean room. But our parts are not clean. So then we have to find a process to sterilize the products that we're gonna assemble it in the clean room. So that's why the process development has a lot of things to consider, way more than research part, because there are regulations that you cannot ignore and you have to comply with in the process.
So, how do you kind of sterilize your components? Do you like spray IPA on it or UV lights?
Yeah, so all of those are the things that we can try. UV light is one thing. The easiest way is finding a manufacturer who already manufactures it for sterilized environment. Then you just bring it in, you clean the outer surface with IPA and UV clean it, and then you just open it in the clean room. If you do not have that, what we're trying to do right now is to find an individual part sterilization process and confirm that it is sterile. IPA is one thing, UV is one thing. If you have money, you could do like a external vendor system where like gamma ray or ethylene oxide, all those things. But you also have to make sure that those sterilization methods are compatible with your products. Our product has a lot of electronic parts. If you spray the crap out of it with IPA, it will not function. So then we have to find other processes to deal with all those things.
Yeah, I was wondering about that. You talk about automation all the time. So how do you take care of the contaminations from like the machine? I know some mechanic equipment, they have lubrications. Those kind of chemical substance have to be carefully controlled. Like how they can
Yeah.
comply with.
The easy answer is there are people who make a clean room certified machines. The harder answer is, how clean room people wears a hazmat suit, like with a mask and all this like white stuff, like covering their hair and everything
Yeah, we wear that every day.
every day.
Not every day, just twice a week.
Yeah,
Just for fun.
we have that for the machines.
Oh,
Yeah,
really?
so the
For the
automation part.
machines.
So, for example, there are a lot of different names for a machine, right? So machine could be a linear rail where it goes from X to X or Y or Z. But you can also have a robot arm where there's like joints, so it can move like 360 degrees and everywhere. So in that particular setting, I believe that there are ways to exactly like you have mentioned, they lubricate a little area, right? Then they can cover it up with the hazmat suit so that it minimizes the debris, the particle formations to go out there. So it is something that you can do even with a machine that is not like completely certified to be in a clean room.
So, since we're talking about automations, how do you think the automation benefits the medical device manufacturer as a whole? Like, is it more meaningful in lowering the labor cost, or it's easier for process control?
It's double-edged, meaning making a process into some type of automation is ungodly hard because it also depends on the medical device, but particularly in my company, our parts can be in micron size, not even centimeter, it's in micron. So automating that particular process can significantly reduce the labor cost. Without the machine, we will have to just hire more people, and that takes up so much place, right? So that is one part that we can think about it as like it really benefits to bring down the cost of the labor, which will translate into how much it's going to cost at the end of the day for our patients to use that medical device. Another thing is it also saves you in time. And time is something that you cannot buy. So as let's hypothetical situation, you already launched this, and then you are making you went viral, and now you have to produce a lot of this at once. In order to get laborers, people, you will have to do AM shift, PM shift. You will have to have a site. Whereas if the machine is reliable, it can run 24/7. Without having to cost too much on any other people's work-life balance, people's in terms of like overall like satisfaction of the job and so on and so forth. So it helps with the company in of itself that it can create an environment where everybody is working a reasonable workload while we try to mass produce all of these things.
I know there are a lot of manufacturing process that can be automated. Is there any process that cannot be automated, or it definitely require humans intervention?
Oh, that is a really, really interesting question. And every situation is going to be so different, but if it's feedback based, it's harder to do. Another thing is the cost of automating the process. So I just talked about how automation really helps to reduce the labor cost. But for example, if you have a robot and that robot is only doing like puzzle piece, that is really inefficient way of using that robot arm. So then per process, you are putting in too much of money for that. So those things, it is not impossible to automate it, but it is not efficient from a company financial perspectives to automate those processes.
Say if you already decided to automate a process, how do you decide what kind of robots you're gonna purchase?
Depending on the process, can you afford it? Financially is one thing, but the other one is you need to look at the limit of your process, and if the weakest point of the process is going to be the maximum that the robot can function. It will never surpass your weakest point. So then you find a robot that can deal with that particular process. Our process, the limitation was micron size parts. So I have to find something that was small and flexible. So that's how you get to decide on the robot. But one robot will never automate everything. So that is why it costs a lot of money, but at least we have that robot to deal with the small parts, and then we are trying to use something more conventional down the road to optimize on the how can we automate more and more.
Are there any issues, defects you saw while automating a process?
Too many. I've seen too many. So this is why the automation is hard, because robot does not know what it's touching, what it's doing. It only knows the things that you have put it for the robot to work. So number one is QC. For us to do an experiment, we see it, we understand it, and we know that was a failure. But robot does not know. So if the robot makes one mistake and that one mistake creates a next mistake, then your whole cascade of assembly is gone. So then installing a QC person to see that process was like the hardest moment of our life. The other one is, for example, we use a laser system, and laser system requires a rigorous safety for a good reason, for your own safety as a handler. Not many lasers are big enough to handle the robot system. So then that was the biggest part. Then we are like spending another 300K on finding the laser that's going to work on our system. But how do you even make sure that it is the process that your robot can handle? So that was another big stuff that we had a problem with. Like if you're a human and you're the one who's doing it, you have a feeling where it's going to fail and where it's going to succeed. With robot, you as a handler is the only limitation you have. So that's why another thing is like I had a lot of people like, oh, it has 6 axes of freedom, you can rotate it however you want. Robots are not do it all or like miracle worker. So then there are a lot of times when I'm like, oh, wow, like I wanted to rotate to the right, but then as it was rotating to the right, it is slightly shifting towards x-axis. I'm like, why? And because the machine was not calibrated correctly. And again, it goes back to the first one. The weakest part about it was that we are using micron size parts. How are you going to QC that? The machine cannot QC that.
Yeah, if you think about it, human brains are basically the most powerful feedback system.
Absolutely, for sure. There's so many times I'm like in front of my robot, it's like, why can't you understand? I'm like, I put in every single parameter down and it still doesn't work. I'm like, I don't know. But yes,
Well,
we're smart.
in its defense, it's only lived for like 10 years and humans been existed for like thousands of years.
Absolutely. So it was like, it's a very humbling experience to work with a robot. It's like, wow, humans are great. Yeah,
All those
exactly.
simple, easy things people can do. It's yeah. But
Yeah,
overall, do you think automation is still promising in the future? Like it's not.
absolutely promising in the future. It's especially with the AI, it has ability to learn a lot more. And like I said, all the problems that I'm facing might be because I'm in a startup company where we cannot buy other sensors to trigger those responses. With those things all complexed in together, it's absolutely going to be worth it.
So now that we have talked about the technical process, let's zoom out a little bit. What do you see as the biggest challenge in medical device?
The biggest challenges for the medical device development.
Yeah.
That is actually really interesting consideration to make, because in my opinion, people are smart, but not many people work towards making a device to save people because it involves money. So I think the biggest challenge is how many people can get together with the focus of, I want to make this work the right way, the best way to the patient. And that could mean a lot of things. Like, first of all, where the hell is the money coming from? Especially post-COVID, a lot of things have closed. Many people were suffering. In that case, I think in overall, from a medical device company perspective, how are you going to survive? I believe was the biggest challenge. In terms of more day-to-day challenges, obviously there are challenges like communicating across multi teams, like making sure that they understand what you're doing is the big stuff. But from my point of view, the development is the challenge is that how can you make it simple? Like that is the biggest challenge that I face every day. We always go for, if you do this step and this step and on top of this and have 8 different layers, you get a perfect sensor. And I'm like, you cannot manufacture that because it's too complicated. So then, people always think that more complexity and harder you talk and do the job, it's going to be better. Actually, no. If your patient is not going to understand what the hell you're doing, you cannot make that happen. So how can we simplify such a complex problem into actionable courses? That is the biggest challenge as a process developer.
The simple, the better.
Absolutely, simpler the better. And that's sometimes where I feel the biggest difference between industry and academia. Academia, no one cares if it cannot make it into the market. You get funding for having fun. You do whatever you want. Who knows, the crazy idea is going to be the best one. But in industry, some people are spending their own money to fund you. So you better get it done.
Now that you mentioned academia, I'm curious, do you guys collaborate with research institutions to kind of ensure your device is aligned with the latest scientific developments?
Yeah, so if you have money and there's a little bit of time, you can receive kind of collaboration from a university side. But most of the times I see it the opposite way. So academic side has a patent and then they start up a company rather than a company reaching for a researcher in the institute. At Illumina, that was absolutely possible because they had extra funding specifically for future development, future research opportunities for a startup company. The fact that you have a company means you have a patent that you're trying to go forward with. So we don't go back to the research institutes much.
So with your experience working in both startups and the large companies like Illumina, how would you compare the culture and the work environment between those two?
Larger the company, that is actually very interesting. I would say larger the company, more opportunity for you to really understand and try out many things without any troubles to your job security. With the bigger the company, they have like general idea of what you're gonna do, but then they are still willing to make a lot of patents and or a lot of ideas to make it better. Startup company, on the other hand, is you may not have a full understanding of the particular research side that you're doing, but you will know from 0 to 100. So, for example, I was specifically a research scientist and at Illumina, and then I specifically worked on this particular project. Although in that particular project, I had a lot of opportunities to do science. But right now, it doesn't matter if I think that's a cool idea. I have to get this to manufacturing. And there are not many people. So I was a scientist. Now I'm an engineer. And then I'm going to be going into regulatory affairs. And then I'll be validating my sensors. So if you are lucky that your startup company is stable throughout those entire time, you will learn everything from 0 to 100.
So how is your daily work life look like? Is it like a really fast-paced working environment, a lot of deadline to meet every day?
Mm,
Like,
it is. How do I explain this? It's like there's no deadlines actually, because no one in the startup company manages a deliverable like that. It is whenever you get it done, you get it done. And the timeline is as soon as possible. So my everyday, it just goes back to like what I was mentioning about the startup company. You get to see the process entire way. Every day, I cannot predict what I'm going to do that day. Like last week, I spent 4 days trying to fabricate all of the products for my downstream process to use. I wasn't an engineer. I wasn't a scientist. I was just a lab tech doing the process that I developed. Next week, I will probably focus a little more on testing and validation because we made the products. Every day, that's why it is more chaotic, because the next day, your manager might come and say, we have new ideas. Then you have to drop everything and then just jump on that process. There are no rules in my current company process. And I think it's one of the things that I will tell people. If you're not a person who can handle high stress, highly fluctuating, change-based environment, process development and or startup company is not going to be good for you. That's something I had to deal with. Like, oh, what do you mean we're dropping this project? Like, they're like, why didn't you tell me before? Then I would have prepared it. But my manager also did not know because it's a startup company. So it is something that I embrace. Chaos is your life, and chaos just means you don't know what you might do the next day.
So speaking of that, what advice would you give to someone who considering a career in medical device process development?
I mean, who am I? Who am I to give advice to people at this point of my life? But if there is one advice that I could give, if you're coming from a research background, make sure that you start to think about how to work with people to understand why. So a lot of times people go into work and then they're like, okay, tell me what to do. And they do it and they wait until they get what to do next. But especially if you're a startup company or a medical device where it might take a very long time before that product gets into the market, if you understand why you're doing it and how you can contribute to the next step, that will significantly keep you motivated to stay in that field.
Yeah, I think it
You know,
can be applied to any
yeah,
job,
I was
not
just about to
just
say, like, yeah, I don't think it's like a medical device development thing, but yeah, it's like everywhere you go, you would want to understand why you're doing this.
will you consider to spend another 10 years in this field and
10 years? So much of commitment. Actually, not from this company, but in the field, yes. It goes back to the way how I started this. I love seeing how all these all these smart ideas of research gets translated into something that is useful for the patient. Research is meaningless if no one gets to use it. So yes, I will still be on my 2 feet trying to get these products out there. And I do believe that people deserve a chance to manage their health and have a better quality of life. I will absolutely do this over and over again.
all right, to kind of wrap things up, let's have a little fun with a hypothetical scenario. Suppose we have a idea for a class 3 medical device that is designed to enhance longevity. What are the action items, timelines, and the key considerations for each phase of process development? It's kind of like a review what we have discussed today to show what you do every day, how you impact humans' life every day.
Y'all, that's such a deep question. So let us try one by one. It honestly, each phase of process development, and here are the assumptions that we have infinite amount of time and infinite amount of money to spend. And with the first stage concept, it's very important that we have creative people. We just need someone who can imagine everything. And then starting the second phase, we need someone who has little who are really good at hands-on prototyping. A lot of people, like designers can, or design engineers can think, but that might not be feasible in real life. So then the second phase is like, okay, how much of concept we can make it into the feasibility. And the feasibility goes to the next one where we work together to make sure that the process is simplified. How simple can we make? And then we go into, okay, so whatever we're process, is it applicable for whatever the certification we need to get or the end result that we're trying to get.
How about timeline?
The timeline, because we have infinite amount of time in this hypothetical situation, I feel like 3 to 4 years of process development when you already have a research product done. I think that's a pretty good timeline. And then because if it's an in vitro or depending on how high of a risk, biocompatibility testing might be the longest timeline that you have to spend. As a person who is doing the process development, all you can do is within the given timeline, how fast can you fail and how fast you can prototype to move it forward.
5 to 10 years, give it or take.
Only for, yeah, give or take only for the process development. Not including research or manufacturing, just for the PD.
Thanks so much, Kasha. It was a really nice time spending talking to you, and it was a great pleasure to chat and share some of the exciting things happening in the medical device developments.
Yeah.
This has been such an insightful conversation. Thank you for sharing your expertise and the career journal with us.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me, and I hope you guys have a wonderful, wonderful rest of the Sunday.